So who's the best insurance company in Michigan? It's kind of a loaded question, but we're going to dive in and go over the main companies that are the most popular in Michigan for homeowners insurance. The main things that you want to think about is there's a few things that you should think about in your home. There's about 4 pieces. One, what is the size of your house? If there's no additional crown molding, bay windows, recessed lighting, speakers in the walls, things like that, your average cost to rebuild a house is around $180. $160 to $200, somewhere in that range is the average cost to build a home. So you take the square footage, times it by that, and that'll give you an idea kind of that 10,000 foot view of what your home replacement cost should be. The location does play a factor because yes, if you're off on an island in Michigan, which is fairly rare, but you could have a lot larger of a cost to get the material to you or the type of labor costs that are in that area. That leads into the materials, which is the third piece that you have to think about is what type of wood, what type of material cost do we have? Are they using special wires for the electricity? Is there higher voltage that we need? So there are a lot of pieces that make up that replacement cost, and that's going to play a big factor on which company actually focuses on what's the best fit. There are companies that do well with older material. There are companies that do well with updated material. So having the right agent that can determine what those are is going to be very beneficial for you to look towards. And as we mentioned in our last video, labor is a huge difference in cost. There's a lot of reasons that it's gone up, and it's not just inflation. There's a lot that had to do with a lot of the 2020, the pandemic type stuff that caused some of the inflation beyond just the price and the cost of labor. We're not going to get too far in depth in that. If you want, I'll link our video at the end that goes a little bit more in depth on that. But let's start looking at some of the major companies. Now, these aren't in any specific order, but the first one that a lot of people are going to hear is the most common name. That's State Farm. State Farm has averaged a little bit below. The average in Michigan is about $1,400 to $1,500 per year, and they're right in that $1,300 to $1,400 range. At least they used to be. They've recently had a few increases, so they may be close to or above. In this scenario, State Farm is a decent company. Probably the best part about them is they're widely available. They have lots of offices you can go into, and they're more of that staple of here's an office to look at. Because of that, their agents are fairly decent as far as working with you. Now, if you're working with an agent that has an office like ours, you could come to it. That's fine, and that's not common. I'd say 95% of the people would rather pick up the phone or send a text message. The conveniences has trumped the offices in general. So that model, although is great, is starting to die off more and more as we see the things in the evolution of the insurance industry. The other benefit is State Farm has a crap ton of discounts. It's almost like one of those policies. Have you ever seen them? They start at like $30,000 and then by the end they're like $1,400. That's kind of what you see with some of these companies is they have all these huge prices, but by the end of it, if you're a fit for them, they have all of these different discounts that add up to what that average cost is. The downfall or the con to going with State Farm is that they are a little bit pricier than the typical insurance company in Michigan. The other piece is they have had several complaints on processing. Now, I don't know if they've fixed this in the past several years, but I had some friends that have worked there in the past, and one of their biggest complaints as an agent was how archaic their system is. It's not necessarily a horrible thing to have an older system because now you're relying on sort of that tech or that knowledge piece to where it's less technology to where it can do it for you. However, there's a larger margin of error and it takes 2 to 3 to 5 times as long to make a process. So if you made a change on your home and said, I want to add this endorsement, and it takes several weeks for them to do that, but that you have a claim, now they'll probably cover it, at least I would assume they would, but in that scenario, you've got to fight and figure all this out. It's just a headache on the customer's end to deal with the slowness or the lack thereof that skill to where some of those technology pieces can just hit a button and you're done. The next one up is Allstate, and they're actually fairly competitive on the home in Michigan. They're struggling a little bit on the auto side, so doing those combos where you're trying to get that best rate, that's where that tends to play a little bit different of a factor. Now, we actually work with several of these companies, Allstate included, and I've been fairly happy with some of the pieces they offer. The only thing that you've got to be very careful with is they tend to default to scheduling your roof on your home. If you're not sure what that is, essentially the quick answer is your roof deteriorates over time, so the amount they cover over time deteriorates. I don't usually recommend ever doing that unless you've got a newer roof and you're willing to take on more risk. Most companies will offer full replacement costs, so if the roof was damaged, whether it's a 5-year-old or a 20-year-old roof, you've got the full amount of whatever it costs to replace that, up to the amount that you've agreed upon, assuming it's a covered claim. The benefits of going with Allstate is they're very similar to State Farm. They're actually probably their direct competitors as far as companies and coverages. They have a strong customer service satisfaction, which you might want to read the reviews lately, because that's kind of a push. But they normally have a really good, strong customer service, especially if you're with an agency like ours. Then yes, you're going to have that experience to where we'll fight those battles with you if we have to. Same scenarios, they have lots of discounts that you can offer. Similar situation, starts off at 20 grand and moves its way down, right? So those are also similar things. The cons is almost identical to State Farm, is that they tend to be more expensive because you are buying part of that name brand, but also they tend to have more complaints on the servicing end. Their technology is fairly up to date as far as if you don't ask the agent, right? You ask the agent, similar process. They've got kind of what we call a GUI, a graphic user interface, on an old system. So they've got a little bit of things to work on, but they are ahead of the game as far as being average as far as technology goes. The next three I'm going to lump together because they are very similar in my opinion. You have Progressive, you have Farmers, and you have Geico. Those are fairly digital. The Farmers stands out a little bit more. Now, the article I was reading actually said Farmers was below the Progressive one. Honestly, I would put Farmers right even with Progressive. They're both really good companies as far as the home. The only thing about Progressive that I've had personal experience with is they're a little bit tougher on claims. That means that they are not willing to play in what we call the gray area. Oh, this might have been covered, this shouldn't have been. They're clear. They want to tell you it is or it isn't covered. You either do or don't get the discount, where the other ones tend to kind of be able to mold that clay or that pricing model a little bit to fit your needs. Cost-wise, you're going to have the less expensive options, which is going to be Progressive. They're kind of averaging around that $1,200 to $1,300 range. And then Farmers and Geico tend to be right in the similar range of Allstate and State Farm. Farmers being the higher of the entire group, they tend to be more of that higher cost tier in some areas. Clearly, it matters what area you're in to create that profile that's a good or bad fit. Moving on to some of the larger companies in Michigan, right now one of the companies crushing it, which we've had really good success with, is Nationwide. Nationwide has been one of those overall great fits. They don't overprice the replacement cost of your home. They've got really good rates. I think they're averaging about $1,300-ish per year. So they're right below that normal pricing. Have we seen them higher? Absolutely, because that's the range, right? And they aren't as picky as they used to be in the past, to where they have had that reputation to where they inspect the home. They're a little bit tougher than the average company. That's a good thing, because you don't want to join a company that just lets any and everybody in. There are some companies in Michigan that don't inspect the home. And when that doesn't happen, that raises your price as claims start to fall into line, because they should have looked at it in the first place. Following that is USAA, which is also a pretty decent company. They have had a little bit less of a reputation lately just because they've almost overbooked themselves. It's kind of like going to a hotel and finding out that they're double booked. They've kind of playing catch up, right? You have to be part of the military to join them, so that's one of the downfalls to their system. But if you are, they do have some benefits. We're starting to see some of the complaints with claims start to show up. I think honestly that's not so much that they are or aren't covered. I think more of it is, were they offered or given the right endorsements, but also were they given enough time frame, because that's where we're saying they're backed up. When you have not enough service or not enough claims adjusters, which is a common thing with a lot of companies, more so with them lately, I've seen in the news that they've had some of those issues, but also a great company. The next two is going to be Hanover and Liberty Mutual. That's essentially Citizens Insurance that we call it, and you've got Liberty Mutual, which is also called Safeco. Safeco tends to be the less expensive brand of Liberty, which most people tend to lean towards. Why pay more for similar coverage or the same thing when you could go to an independent agent and have the option to shop a ton of places, right? That's what most people lean towards. That's one of the reasons we have a lot of customers with them. But in the same breath, Citizens has been a decent company. Once again, most of these companies are seeing some sort of a rate increase, so it really depends on the time frame, the fit, and the type of client that they're looking for. Citizens has a lot of endorsements, and the way they add on the additional liability piece, similar to Liberty Mutual, it really just depends on who's going to have the best features, and are the reviews in your area good? Because yes, we want to have a great policy, we want to have it as cheap as possible, but we also want to actually be covered if we have a claim. Is this a struggle? Do I have to fight for the next 3 to 6 months to get my claim paid? Both of these companies actually have been pretty decent in my opinion. The last one, which is actually a little bit above the highest one that I've seen, which was Farmers, the next cost-wise is Chubb. Similar to Liberty Mutual, Chubb has had really good ratings with customer service. The only downfall is that they're not as known in Michigan or as wide as far as like their product offerings. So having the same coverage for the same policy, Chubb can be a lot more expensive in those scenarios. Keep in mind, if you are shopping for a new home in Michigan or moving to Michigan, or you're just not sure if you're paying the right amount, let us know in the comments below or fill out the link in the description below where we can actually work with you. We work with a ton of these different companies where we can shop the price and the policy to make sure it has the right fit for you. If you're buying a new home, if your mortgage broker isn't working with your realtor, who isn't working with your insurance agent, there's some pieces that you're missing out on. The ease of use of having the three that work together is powerful. Like I said in the link description below, feel free to ask us questions. Otherwise, if you're just at the stages of what we mentioned, there's that link in the description below, but you also gotta keep in mind that you gotta know what coverages you should carry. If you haven't already watched our Insurance 101, I'm going to put the link up there to check it out. Otherwise, if you're learning more about the endorsements and what add-ons you have or don't have on your policy, let's go ahead and check out the video there. I'm Mark with Valor Insurance. I'll see you soon.